Hi, hello, how are you? I am Scout, and today I'm doing a book unhaul. So I'm going to be covering all the books that are leaving my collection and why they are. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is Nora Ephron's I Remember Nothing. I really loved this book. I read it from the library. This is actually the copy that's from my library. I ended up buying it during the book sale at the end of the year. And I really loved this book. It's just not my favorite Nora Ephron book, and it's not one that I see myself revisiting. So I think it needs to go to someone who would actually want to read it again or someone who wants to read it for the first time. So that's why this book is going to be leaving my collection. The next book I actually also bought from the library sale that same year, I think. This is the Natalie Wood biography. It's by Suzanne Finstand. I have read part of this book and then my life just got really busy and I didn't get to finish it. And it's really well written and it's really interesting. It is just a book that every time I look at it, I'm getting really intimidated by the size amount and that it and it's just not a book that I think I'm going to ever finish. I think Natalie Wood's life is super interesting and compelling, but I just don't know if I want to read this book about it. So I'm going to also have this leave my collection as well. The next book is also another nonfiction. It is a book that I've talked about on the channel. It's So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. I read this for my book club and I actually really liked it, but the big thing for this book was that I just don't think I'll read it again. It's a nonfiction book, and a lot of times with nonfiction books, I don't want to read them again. And this is definitely one that fits that category of I've already gotten the information from this book. I'm not super keen to reread that same information. So I think this book should go to someone else. And actually, fun fact about this one, I bought it from a secondhand store. Like this book had already been donated before. So I think that this book, it should continue its life as a book that gets recirculated. The next one is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. I actually really loved this book too. I thought it was super well written. It's really interesting. Obviously, like Britney Spears' life is like extremely interesting. And it's just, again, another book that I'm not very interested in rereading. I will say, if you're wanting to read it or interested in rereading it, this book does not talk about Britney's career. So if you don't know about Britney's career, at times the plot or like the timeline can be kind of confusing because you're like, I don't really know what she's talking about if you don't know her music career. I actually, thank goodness, had watched a video that was like 3 hours long and it covered her entire career, not her interpersonal life. So having watched that video, I knew exactly what she was talking about when she starts talking about them because she won't go into detail about the music itself. And so I really loved reading this as like a companion with that like 3 hour video, but I didn't love the book enough to want to reread it. The next book that I'm getting rid of might kind of be a surprise because it's written by one of my favorite authors, which is Dolly Alderton. It's the book Ghosts. I started this a hot minute ago, like a couple of years, and I was just really uninterested in the premise, and I haven't read it since then. And it's been in my collection for a couple of years, kind of because I keep going, well, I love that author. And I'm like, you know what? That's not actually a good enough reason to just keep a book. And so I am going to put this book back into circulation so that someone else can enjoy it and like the writing of Dolly Alderton. I don't have to love every single book by my favorite author. Okay, this next one is Rough by Rachel Thompson. So this is another nonfiction book. As you can kind of see, I'm getting rid of a lot of nonfiction. I'm still like someone who really likes nonfiction. The issue I have with it is just that nonfiction tends to be something that I don't want to reread. And so they tend to leave my collections pretty quickly because if I have no interest rereading them, they shouldn't stay. Books are not decorations, they should be paged and leafed through. And Rough is good. It's not great, it's not like a favorite book, and it's not a book that I want to reread. I think it's interesting and has a lot to say, but it's not necessarily a book that needs to stay in my shelf forever and ever. Okay. The next book that I'm getting rid of actually kind of has a little bit of a funny story about why it never got read. This is Buzz by Hallie Lieberman. So it was really hard for me to find a copy, and I finally found a copy, and the book had existed for years at that point. But I finally got my hands on a copy, and the week that it was delivering was the same week that a podcast I really liked covered the exact same topic, and they cited this book in their podcast as like part of their research. And I was like, cool. And I like listened to that podcast while I was running, and I was like, oh, that's this entire book, huh? So then when the book finally arrived, I was like, oh, I've already read this. I've already listened to like a podcast covering it. And so it doesn't change that this is like interesting to me. It's just I didn't want to pick it up and read it because I had already listened to a podcast that covered the research that was in this book. That's just like a bummer that can happen to an author, I guess. And so I was interested, but I just never ended up reading it. And I think it should go to someone who's going to read it. This next book is Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. I love this book. I think this book is really, really great. And the reason why it is leaving my shelf is because it is not a book I'm going to reread. I loved it a lot. I think it's really great. I think a lot of people should read it. It's just not a book that I'm going to reread. And this has been on my shelf since it came out. And it's always been kept in all of these unhaulings because I'm like, I love this book. This book is so good, which it is. Those are true facts about this book. But the problem is that it's just sitting there. And like I said a little bit earlier, a book is not decoration. I can't in good conscience keep a book just because I think it's great and not be wanting to reread it. So I just think this book needs to go to a new home where someone is going to love it and reread it over and over again. So that is why this book is leaving my collection. I recommend that book to anyone. That book is really good. The next book, you might have heard me talk about this book on the channel because I was a big old hater. This is Romantic Comedy by Curtis Sittenfeld. So I did not like this book. I read it for my book club, and it was just a book that wasn't for me. I've harped on this book enough. I don't need to go crazy on this book, but I just didn't love it. It just really wasn't for me. And actually, a friend of mine, I was talking to her about this book, and she was actually still interested in it despite the issues that I had with the book. So this is actually going to go to her because I think this should go to someone who's going to love it, because someone will love it. So this book is also leaving my collection. The next book I actually already gave away. I kind of forgot to keep it for this video, but c'est la vie, it's gone. And that is Exit Lane by Erica Vernick. So it is a book I read for my genre investigation series. It was where I investigated the romance genre. I thought it was fine. I gave it a 6 out of 10. But it just wasn't a book that I was going to reread. I didn't really like the main character. I felt like sometimes her actions just really didn't make sense. And I know that there are people who act a fool sometimes, but I was like, she's acting a fool in a way that is unfathomable to me. And so I just was like, mm-mm. And I knew I wouldn't reread it. And also I just knew I wasn't going to loan that out to a friend. I didn't think a friend would like that book either. And so it just also needed to leave my home. Okay, I'm looking at the last book here, and I saved it for last because I have really nasty things to say about it. If you've seen my books I read in the spring video, you know what book this is. This is Brutes by Diz Tate. And I was so excited for this book. I was so excited about this book. And then I read it. And it was bad. This book suffers from insufferable pretentiousness, I guess is the best way to describe it. This feels like it's written by someone who thinks they're very smart and they are not. And it is written for people who are pretentious, who also think they are smarter than they are. It's written in a way that lacks cohesion and comprehension. And I have evidence to support that claim, because that sounds like it could be a me problem, But it's not a me problem. And my evidence is I got to the ending, and the ending was so incongruous with the rest of the book that I was like, what? I was like, obviously this is symbolic. Like, I'm not dumb. I can tell that this is like fanciful, it's symbolic, but like, what's it trying to say? So I like Googled it because I was like, you know what? She probably did an interview where she talked about it. And I was like, oh, and I'll probably feel like enlightened and be like, oh, okay, like that is what she intended. What I found was a thread online of a bunch of people who've read this book who also couldn't understand what the ending meant. And each of them responded to each other, and like they all had different interpretations of it, to the point that it changes the meaning of the book. And like that's where I have a problem. I don't mind vagueness in writing. Like, particularly, I've spoken about it that I'm currently writing a book, and like the ending is slightly vague in my book. You don't necessarily know what this character is going to do at the very end. There's a resolution to the main conflict, but there is some vagueness about how the characters are going to advance forward afterwards. This book, if, and the thing is, if you're going to do vague, it shouldn't change what the book means to the audience. Like, me choosing to be vague about what the character's actions going forward does not change the ending of the book and the resolution for the storyline. In this book, it does. And that's like an actual problem. And I think it's written to be like, it's, you know, it's unique or whatever. But like, that's actually not in service to your readers. And like the pull quotes on the back are like acting like this is an innovative book that's never been done before. And I'm like, it has been done before. And you know how I know it's been done before? Because you compared it to other books in marketing. They compared it to my favorite book of all time, which it is not. Just like, frankly, it's not. It follows a similar format, but like unsuccessfully. Because a big argument that was happening in the thread about this book was that people were confused about that formatting. Because I cannot say the title of my favorite book, but that book is written in the format of voyeurism, where someone is voyeuristically watching someone else and detailing their life that way. This book is written the same way, but bad, because in the other book, it doesn't matter who's actively watching. But in this book, it does. And it's not clear enough. There was like arguments on that Reddit page being like, no, it's definitely this person's point of view, and you can tell from this piece of evidence, but then also from this piece of evidence it shows that it's not that person. Like, the book is written in a too confusing of a manner, and I think that if you actually ask the author, she'd be like, that's the point. She gives me that energy, just like based off of this book. And I think that's a bad thing. That's bad. Your book doesn't have to be so simple that everyone understands it, but it shouldn't be this complex. And I wouldn't be this angry about it if I didn't find out that a bunch of other people didn't understand the book. I don't think it's very well written. I think it's confusing to be confusing. And another huge gripe I have with the book, my other really big issue with the book, is that it's surrealist. And that's not a genre that I particularly like, but I won't condemn a book for being surrealist. I'll just say, like, that's not a book for me. But the problem is this book isn't marketed as that. So again, we're coming up against the same problem of the marketing's really off for this book. It's almost like the marketing person didn't read the book. Because I would not market this book the way that they marketed it. If I was going to market it, I would say it's a mix of The Florida Project with Bunny by Mona Edward. Because that is indicative of the book, not how they marketed it. And if I had known it was going to be surrealist, I probably wouldn't have picked it up. And that's okay. I'm guessing that's why they didn't mention that it was surrealist. They wanted more people to pick it up. But here's the thing. You cannot market your book as something that it's not. Because then when it doesn't have the right things and it's not what it said it was, people are going to be mad. You sold them a false bill of goods. And it's just like, this was really, really disappointing to me as a novel. The mystery is uninteresting. It's uncompelling. you're oftentimes bored and like, do I actually care where this girl went? You don't get enough detail and you get too much of detail in other areas. It's just not well written. So those are all the books that I am going to be unhauling. Um, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry for getting a little ranty at the end. I just was like genuinely really disappointed with that last book. I'll see you next time. Bye.